Hi everyone, welcome back to Daily Active English. In this video, we are going to learn 10 advanced accuracy, correctness, and quality adverbs. These words help you explain how well something is done. For example, instead of saying, "The model predicted the trend correctly," you can say, "The model accurately predicted the trend." Instead of saying, "The rules were clearly stated," you can say, "The rules were explicitly stated." These small changes make your English sound more precise, more academic, and more professional. Let us start. Before we learn the words one by one, let us understand the main idea. These adverbs describe the quality of an action. Some of them describe accuracy. For example, accurately, precisely, and faithfully. Some of them describe suitability. For example, appropriately and properly. Some of them describe clarity. For example, coherently, concisely, and explicitly. And some of them describe completeness. For example, comprehensively and thoroughly. So the main idea is simple. These adverbs help you describe not only what someone did, but how well they did it.
Accurately.
Accurately.
Accurately means correctly, exactly, or without mistakes. In basic English, you can say, "The model predicted the trend correctly." In more advanced English, you can say, "The model accurately predicted the trend." For example, climate models must accurately predict long-term trends to inform effective policy decisions. You can also say, "The report accurately describes the problem." "The device accurately measures temperature." "The witness accurately remembered the details." Use accurately when the information, measurement, or prediction is correct.
Appropriately.
Appropriately.
Appropriately means suitably, correctly, or in a way that fits the situation. In basic English, you can say, "The groups were matched in the right way." In more advanced English, you can say, "The groups were appropriately matched." For example, "The control group was appropriately matched with the experimental group in terms of age and socioeconomic status." You can also say, "Please dress appropriately for the interview." "The issue was handled appropriately." "The method was appropriately selected." Use appropriately when something fits the context, rule, or situation.
Coherently.
Coherently.
Coherently means clearly, logically, and in a way that is easy to understand. In basic English, you can say, "He explained his ideas clearly." In more advanced English, you can say, "He explained his ideas coherently." For example, "The researcher was unable to present his findings coherently during the conference due to technical difficulties." You can also say, "She spoke coherently during the interview." "The essay is coherently organized." "The argument was presented coherently." Use coherently when ideas are connected logically and clearly.
Comprehensively.
Comprehensively.
Comprehensively means completely, thoroughly, and covering all important parts. In basic English, you can say, "They check the problem in detail." In more advanced English, you can say, "They comprehensively assess the problem." For example, "The environmental impact of the proposed development was comprehensively assessed before construction began." You can also say, "The topic was comprehensively explained." "The risks were comprehensively reviewed." "The system was comprehensively tested." Use comprehensively when all important parts are included.
Concisely.
Concisely.
Concisely means briefly, clearly, and without unnecessary words. In basic English, you can say, the abstract should summarize the study shortly. In more advanced English, you can say, the abstract should concisely summarize the study. For example, the abstract should concisely summarize the study's objectives, methods, and key findings. You can also say, please explain your answer concisely. The report presents the results concisely. She stated the problem concisely. Use concisely when you want to say something clearly with fewer words.
Explicitly.
Explicitly.
Explicitly means clearly, directly, and without leaving room for doubt. In basic English, you can say, the rules were clearly stated. In more advanced English, you can say, the rules were explicitly stated. For example, the terms of the agreement were explicitly stated to avoid any future misunderstandings. You can also say, the teacher explicitly explained the rule. The document explicitly mentions the deadline. The instructions explicitly prohibit copying. Use explicitly when something is said directly and clearly.
Faithfully.
Faithfully.
Faithfully means accurately, carefully, or in a loyal and reliable way. In basic English, you can say, the censor recorded the data correctly. In more advanced English, you can say, the censor faithfully recorded the data. For example, the data logger faithfully recorded temperature readings every 5 seconds throughout the 6-month experiment. You can also say, the translation faithfully reflects the original text. The model faithfully represents the process. The assistant faithfully followed the instructions. Use faithfully when something follows the original, the data, or instructions closely.
Precisely.
Precisely.
Precisely means exactly, specifically, or with great accuracy. In basic English, you can say, the algorithm calculated the position exactly. In more advanced English, you can say, the algorithm calculated the position precisely. For example, the algorithm calculates the satellite's position precisely, with an error margin of less than 1 meter. You can also say, the time was recorded precisely. She described the problem precisely. The machine cuts the material precisely. Use precisely when exact detail or measurement matters.
Properly.
Properly.
Properly means correctly, suitably, or in the right way. In basic English, you can say, the equipment must be maintained in the right way. In more advanced English, you can say, the equipment must be properly maintained. For example, if the equipment is not properly maintained, the experimental results may be compromised. You can also say, please complete the form properly. The system must be properly installed. The data was not properly analyzed. Use properly when something is done in the correct or expected way.
Thoroughly.
Thoroughly.
Thoroughly means completely, carefully, and in great detail. In basic English, you can say, the data must be analyzed carefully. In more advanced English, you can say, the data must be thoroughly analyzed. For example, the data must be thoroughly analyzed before any conclusions can be drawn. You can also say, the room was thoroughly cleaned. The proposal was thoroughly reviewed. The issue should be thoroughly investigated. Use thoroughly when the action is complete and detailed. Now, let us see these adverbs inside an academic research story. Imagine a researcher observing an experiment. Her job is not only to collect data. She must collect the data carefully, explain the results clearly, and write the report professionally. This is where these adverbs become very useful. They help us describe how academic work should be done. A researcher must record data accurately. She must choose methods appropriately. She must explain findings coherently. She must review the topic comprehensively. And she must analyze the results thoroughly. So, these adverbs are not just vocabulary words. They describe the quality of academic work. Now, let us read the researcher's notes. The researcher recorded the sensor readings accurately and faithfully. Here, accurately means the readings were correct. Faithfully means the readings were recorded reliably, without distortion. She measured the displacement values precisely. Precisely means with exact detail. She followed the testing procedure properly. Properly means in the correct way. She selected the analysis method appropriately. Appropriately means the method was suitable for the study. Then, she reviewed the previous studies comprehensively. Comprehensively means she covered the topic in a complete and detailed way. In her report, she explained the findings coherently and concisely. Coherently means the ideas were logical and easy to follow. Concisely means she explained them briefly, without unnecessary details. She also stated the limitations explicitly. Explicitly means clearly and directly. Finally, she analyzed the results thoroughly before drawing a conclusion. Thoroughly means carefully and completely. This is how these adverbs work naturally in academic English. Let us break down the story. First, we have accuracy and reliability adverbs. Accurately, precisely, and faithfully describe correct and reliable measurement. For example, the researcher recorded the data accurately. The values were measured precisely. The censor faithfully recorded the readings. Next, we have method adverbs. Appropriately and properly describe whether the method or procedure is suitable and correct. For example, the method was selected appropriately. The procedure was followed properly. Then, we have communication adverbs. Coherently, concisely, and explicitly describe good academic writing. For example, the findings were explained coherently. The summary was written concisely. The limitations were stated explicitly. Finally, we have complete work adverbs. Comprehensively and thoroughly describe detailed and careful academic work. For example, the literature was reviewed comprehensively. The results were analyzed thoroughly. So, in an academic study, these adverbs help us describe quality. They show whether the work is accurate, suitable, clear, complete, and professional. Now, let us look at these adverbs as a quality check workflow. First, we collect information. At this stage, we can use accurately, precisely, and faithfully. For example, data should be accurately collected, precisely measured, and faithfully recorded. Second, we choose the right method. At this stage, we can use appropriately and properly. For example, a method should be appropriately selected and properly applied. Third, we explain the idea. At this stage, we can use coherently, concisely, and explicitly. For example, ideas should be coherently organized, concisely explained, and explicitly stated. Finally, we check completeness. At this stage, we can use comprehensively and thoroughly. For example, a problem should be comprehensively reviewed and thoroughly analyzed. So, these adverbs help us describe the quality of each step. Now, let us compare different types of quality. Some adverbs focus on exactness. Accurately, precisely, and faithfully show that something is correct, exact, or reliable. Some adverbs focus on suitability. Appropriately and properly show that something is right for the situation or done in the correct way. Some adverbs focus on clear communication. Coherently, concisely, and explicitly help us explain ideas in a clear, short, logical, or direct way. And some adverbs focus on depth and coverage. Comprehensively and thoroughly show that something is complete, detailed, and careful. So, before choosing an adverb, ask yourself, do I want to describe accuracy, suitability, clarity, or completeness? Now, let us build an academic sentence with quality adverbs. Start with a simple sentence. The researcher explained the results. Now add clarity. The researcher explained the results coherently and concisely. Now add directness. The researcher explicitly stated the limitations of the study. Now add completeness. The data was thoroughly and comprehensively analyzed. Now let us combine the ideas. The researcher coherently and concisely explained the results, explicitly stated the limitations, and thoroughly analyzed the data. This sounds much stronger and more academic. So, quality adverbs help you upgrade simple sentences into more precise academic sentences. Now, let us look at some common differences. Accurately and precisely are close, but not exactly the same. Accurately means correctly, without mistakes. Precisely means exactly, with fine detail. Properly and appropriately are also close. Properly means in the correct way. Appropriately means suitable for the situation. Concisely and comprehensively are very different. Concisely means short and clear. Comprehensively means covering all important parts. Explicitly and coherently are also different. Explicitly means directly and clearly stated. Coherently means logically connected and easy to follow. Finally, thoroughly and faithfully are different. Thoroughly means completely and carefully. Faithfully means accurately following the original, data, or instructions. Let us quickly review all 10 adverbs. Accurately means correctly or without mistakes. Appropriately means suitably or in the right context. Coherently means clearly and logically. Comprehensively means covering all important parts. Concisely means briefly and clearly. Explicitly means directly and clearly. Faithfully means accurately and reliably. Precisely means exactly or specifically. Properly means in the correct way. Thoroughly means completely and carefully. Now, let us see all these adverbs in one IELTS-style paragraph. Pay attention to the target adverbs. To make public policy more effective, governments must accurately collect data and properly evaluate social needs. Research findings should be presented coherently and concisely so that decision makers can understand them quickly. However, complex issues must also be examined comprehensively and thoroughly before final decisions are made. If rules are stated explicitly, citizens are less likely to misunderstand them. In addition, official reports should faithfully reflect the available evidence and describe outcomes precisely. When policies are designed appropriately, they are more likely to solve real problems. This paragraph shows how these adverbs can work naturally in formal and academic English. Let us break down the paragraph. First, we have data and evidence adverbs. accurately, faithfully, and precisely help us describe correct and reliable information. Next, we have presentation and clarity adverbs. Coherently, concisely, and explicitly help us explain ideas clearly, logically, briefly, and directly. Finally, we have process and quality adverbs. Properly, appropriately, comprehensively, and thoroughly help us describe correct, suitable, complete, and careful action. So, these adverbs help you describe how carefully, clearly, correctly, and completely something is done in academic English. A quiz section. Now let us test what you have learned. You will see 5 questions. Choose the best adverb to complete each sentence. Pause the video after the questions and choose your answers. Then, continue the video to check the correct answers. Question 1. The report blank describes the problem. A. Accurately, B. Temporarily, C. Severely. Question 2. The abstract should blank summarize the study. A. Concisely, B. Abruptly, C. Adversely. Question 3. The rules were blank stated to avoid confusion. A. Explicitly, B. Randomly, C. Inevitably. Question 4. The data must be blank analyzed before conclusions are drawn. A. Thoroughly, B. Suddenly, C. Detrimentally. Question 5. The method was blank selected for this context. A. Appropriately, B. Devastatingly, C. Eventually. Pause the video now and choose your answers. Answer section. Now let us check the answers. Question 1. The correct answer is A. Accurately. The report accurately describes the problem. Accurately means correctly or exactly. Question 2. The correct answer is A. Concisely. The abstract should concisely summarize the study. Concisely means briefly and clearly without unnecessary details. Question 3. The correct answer is A. Explicitly. The rules were explicitly stated to avoid confusion. Explicitly means clearly and directly. Question 4. The correct answer is A. Thoroughly. The data must be thoroughly analyzed before conclusions are drawn. Thoroughly means carefully and completely. Question 5. The correct answer is A. Appropriately. The method was appropriately selected for this context. Appropriately means suitably or correctly for the situation. How many did you get correct? If you got all 5 correct, great job. If you made mistakes, do not worry. Watch the lesson again and focus on how each adverb works inside the sentence. Do not only memorize individual words. Learn what job each adverb does in a sentence. Use accurately and precisely when correctness and exactness matter. Use appropriately and properly when something must fit the situation or be done in the right way. Use coherently, concisely, and explicitly when you want to communicate clearly. Use comprehensively and thoroughly when something must be complete and detailed. Use faithfully when something follows the original, data, or instructions closely. If you learn these patterns, your English will sound clearer, more precise, more academic, and more professional. Thanks for watching. Follow Daily Active English for more advanced English vocabulary. See you in the next video.